The fluorescent lights in the pediatric ICU hallway hummed with a frequency that lived just behind my eyes. A low, grinding beef, lat drone that settled into my skull and refused to leave. It was the sound of the last 6 months of my life, a constant companion to sleepless nights, medical charts, and the slow-motion terror of watching my child fade. The air carried that unmistakable hospital blend, antiseptic so sharp it burned the nose, waxed linoleum, and the faint metallic tang of fear that never fully disappeared no matter how clean floors were. On Tuesday, November 14th at exactly 2:47 p.m. That sound stopped, not gradually, not softly. It vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch inside my head, replacing it with a ringing silence so loud it made my knees weaken. That was the moment Dr. Alana Vance reached out, wrapped her fingers tightly around my arm, and pulled me off the main corridor and into a supply closet. Alana was the head of nephrology at St. Jude's. She was a surgeon, a woman whose hands were famous for their steadiness. She had known me since I was a child, running around hospital fundraisers with crooked pigtails and skinned knees. She had held my 8-year-old son's life in her hands since the day he was diagnosed. She was not someone who panicked. And yet, as she shut the door behind us, I felt her shaking. The closet was barely large enough for 2 people. Shelves pressed in on both sides, stacked with saline bags, Roman IV tubing, and boxes of latex gloves. A half-empty jug of industrial cleaner sat on the floor, leaking the sharp smell of bleach mixed with something old and sour, like water left too long in a mop bucket. The air felt thick, trapped. Alana didn't look at me at first. She stared at the door, at the thin line of light underneath it, as if someone might be listening. When she finally spoke, her voice dropped so low it barely carried, and yet it felt like it was screaming directly into my chest. "Morgan," she said, swallowing hard, "I shouldn't be telling you this." My heart started pounding, fast and uneven, slamming into my ribs like it wanted out. Blood rushed into my ears until I could barely hear my own breathing. This violates HIPAA. It violates every ethical oath I've taken. I could lose my license, my pension, everything. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, knuckles white. "But I've known you your whole life, and I can't watch this happen. What is it?" I asked, the words scraping out of my throat. I grabbed the metal shelf beside me to steady myself, the cold steel biting into my palm. Did the test results come back? Is Gavin not a match? Is Leo going back on the list? Did his creatinine spike again? 10 minutes earlier, my husband had walked out of her office. He had found me in the waiting room, his face carefully arranged into devastation. Tears streamed down his smooth, moisturized cheeks, stopping just short of ruining his complexion. He held my hands, firm enough to feel supportive, careful enough not to wrinkle his linen shirt. "I'm not a match, baby," he had said, his voice breaking in all the right places. "My antibodies are too high, the cross-match failed, I can't save him." He had buried his face into my neck, his tears damp against my skin. I had rubbed his back, felt the sculpted muscle beneath the fabric, and whispered that it wasn't his fault. I had comforted him while my son lay connected to machines down the hall. Alana finally met my eyes. What I saw there made my stomach drop. It wasn't just pity, it was anger, white, hot, barely contained rage. "Morgan," she said carefully, forcing each syllable into place. "Gavin is a match, a perfect one. 6 out of 6 antigens. We haven't seen a donor match this clean in 3 years. His kidney is practically a clone of what Leo needs." The words slid past me without meaning. My brain refused to accept them, like someone speaking a language I didn't understand. "But he said," my voice sounded far away, thin, "he told me his antibodies," he lied, Alana said. The word hung between us, thick and poisonous. He didn't fail screening. He didn't come close. He declined. He signed a refusal to donate. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "He cited personal career risks," she continued, her jaw tightening, "and concerns over physical scarring." The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. A cold wave rushed up my spine, draining the warmth from my body. "Scarring?" I whispered. "Our son is dying," she said, the word son cutting through the air. "Leo has maybe 4 months without a kidney. His dialysis port is infected. He weighs 48 pounds, and Gavin refused because he didn't want a 3-inch scar. My chest constricted so hard it hurt to breathe. He asked me to lie to you. Alana went on, her voice trembling with restrained fury. He told me to say he wasn't a match. He said, Morgan gets emotional. She won't understand that my body is my brand. I can't afford 6 weeks of downtime. I have a men's health cover shoot in January, the man who wore fight for Leo shirts every day, the man who posted prayer captions and crying selfies to hundreds of thousands of followers. The man who called our child his little warrior had decided that visible abs mattered more than his son's life. Alana grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough that I knew it would bruise. I never told you this, she whispered, eyes flicking toward the door. If anyone asks, I'll deny it. But you needed to know the obstacle isn't biology, it's him. She opened the door and slipped out, her white coat whispering as she disappeared down the hall, leaving me alone in the dim closet with the smell of bleach and the sudden, shattering clarity that the greatest threat to my child wasn't the disease eating his kidneys, it was the man who helped create him. My name is Morgan Pierce. I was 36 years old at the time, and for 12 years I had worked as a senior forensic accountant at Holloway, Finch and Green, one of the most aggressive litigation firms in Chicago. People hear the word accountant and imagine beige offices, quiet keyboards, and harmless spreadsheets. They imagine boredom, they imagine safety. They are wrong. What I did for a living wasn't bookkeeping. It was forensic work. It was an autopsy performed on financial lives. I took apart numbers the way pathologists take apart bodies, tracing causes of death, identifying the exact moment something went wrong, finding what others wanted buried. I specialized in lies, not emotional lies, not romantic ones, but the kind written in decimals and timestamps. I found money people thought no one would ever follow. I unraveled shell companies layered across jurisdictions. I read bank statements the way other people read faces. A man's coffee purchases could tell me if he was sleeping somewhere else. His gas station withdrawals could tell me how far he was willing to drive to lie. I had a reputation. They called me the auditor from hell because I didn't miss things. I didn't forget numbers, and I never, ever accepted an explanation without proof. Somehow, for nearly a decade, I had broken my own rule inside my own home. I met Gavin when I was 24. He was beautiful in a way that demanded attention. Tall, symmetrical, charismatic, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in advertisements even before he actually did. He worked as a personal trainer at an Equinox downtown and talked endlessly about building a brand, not just a career. I was the stable one. I had the salary, the benefits, the retirement plan. I believed in him. I paid the rent when he couldn't. I covered groceries while he bought camera equipment. I funded gym memberships, supplements, traveled to fitness expos in Miami and Los Angeles. I told myself we were investing in our future. When his obsession with appearance intensified, I rationalized it. I told myself image mattered in his industry. When he spent more time filming than parenting, I told myself everyone coped differently. When he cared more about lighting than listening, I swallowed my irritation and kept going. I was good at compartmentalizing. It was how I survived my job. Walking out of that supply clause, it changed everything. I didn't feel rage right away. Rage is loud. What I felt was precision. The same icy calm that settled over me when I discovered a hidden decimal point that turned an expense report into a felony. The same mental clarity I felt when a hostile witness smiled too confidently. Gavin hadn't just betrayed me. He had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He had assumed love had blinded me permanently. I found him near the nurse's station, leaning against the wall with his phone in his hand. The performance was gone. No tears, no shaking, just concentration and a faint smile as his thumbs flew across the screen. When he saw me, the transformation was instant. Shoulders slumped, brow furrowed. Phone Sunday night arrived with artificial warmth and manufactured reverence. November 19th, the house was unrecognizable, transformed from a place where my son once lined up toy rockets on the living room floor into a glossy stage set designed for public consumption. Ring lights glowed in corners like silent witnesses. A hired DJ adjusted sound levels near the staircase. The smell of catered food, rich, oily, excessive, clung to the air, mixing with cologne, hairspray, and the faint ozone of overheating electronics. Gavin had spared no expense. He never did when there was an audience. About 60 people filled the space, most of them fitness influencers or aspiring ones, bodies sculpted, teeth white, skin bronzed under professional lighting. Nearly every hand held a phone mounted on a gimbal, live streaming to thousands of unseen viewers. This was supposed to be a prayer vigil and fundraiser for our son. It looked more like a nightclub opening. Laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked. Donations chimed in real time from the GoFundMe app. Each notification sound sharp and metallic. Gavin stood at the center of it all, radiant. He wore a tight white t-shirt that clung to his arms, designer jeans, sneakers so new the soles were spotless. A microphone rested comfortably in his hand, as if it had been molded for him. This was his natural habitat. Attention fed him. He thrived on it. I watched from the staircase, dressed in black, feeling detached, observant, like I was studying a specimen rather than a husband. My brother Mark stood near the front door. His posture was rigid, his jaw clenched. Beside him were two men who didn't fit the room at all. No spray tans, no phones, plain clothes, neutral expressions, eyes constantly moving. Law enforcement didn't announce itself. It waited. Tiffany Banks lingered near the back half, hidden behind a decorative plant. She wore a fitted dress that hugged a body financed by stolen money. She looked bored, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up when Gavin's voice rose. She never once looked toward the framed photo of Leo on the mantel. Gavin lifted the microphone, flashing his practiced, humble smile. The room quieted. "Thank you all for being here," he said, voice booming through the speakers. "This has been the hardest week of my life." A pause, a breath timed perfectly. Finding out I couldn't donate, it broke me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Sympathy on cue. I wanted to save my son," he continued, hand pressed to his chest. "But sometimes God has other plans." Phones zoomed in. Comments exploded across live streams. I could almost hear the praise scrolling past. "We've raised over $100,000, Gavin said, raising his voice, energy building. "And before I leave on my spiritual retreat to find answers, I want to push one last time. Let's show Leo how strong his community is. Can we hit 150,000 tonight?" Cheers erupted. People lifted their phones higher, fingers already tapping donation buttons. The sound of incoming contributions chimed again and again, like a slot machine paying out. That was my cue. I stepped away from the stairs and walked calmly toward the AV table. The videographer, a young man named Josh who idolized Gavin, glanced up nervously. "Gavin wants the tribute video now," I said evenly, "the one I made." Josh nodded immediately. "Yeah," he mentioned a surprise. "It's a big one," I said, handing him the USB drive. Files labeled the truth. He plugged it in without hesitation. Behind Gavin, the slideshow of curated father. Son photos faded to black. Gavin didn't notice at first. He was basking in applause, eyes closed, chin lifted, soaking it in. "It's about sacrifice," he said. "Doing whatever it takes." The screen lit up. A document appeared, magnified and unmistakable. "Refusal to donate organ Gavin Pierce, November 14 reason. Cosmetic concerns, potential scarring, interference with modeling schedule." The room went silent. Confusion rippled outward like a shockwave, whispers, gasps. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it was a mistake. Gavin turned around, the color drained from his face so fast it was almost fascinating. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes locked onto his own signature at the bottom of the page. "What is this?" he stammered, voice cracking, confidence collapsing into panic. "This isn't real. This is fake. Josh, cut this. Cut it now." Before anyone moved, the screen changed. An email appeared, time-stamped, sent from the hospital waiting room. "Good news. Successfully dodged the donation. Doctor bought the career-risk excuse. Confirming Chalum retreat. Upgrade Tiffany's ticket to first class. Engagement is through the roof. The silence became absolute. Phones stopped moving, then started again, faster than before, capturing everything. Live stream comments scrolled violently. Gavin's face glistened with sweat. His lips trembled. "This is a hack," he shouted, raising his hands. "It's AI deepfake. Someone's trying to destroy me." The screen shifted again. Bank statements. Transfers highlighted in red. $12,000. Miami plastic surgery $4,500. Delta Airlines $2,800. Rent. Tiffany Banks. I stepped forward and took the microphone from his slack grip. "It's not a hack," I said, my voice amplified, calm, cutting through the chaos. "You didn't fail the test. You refused. You chose your abs over your son's life. Then you stole the money donated to save him to fund your mistress and your vacations." Gavin lunged toward me, rage finally breaking through the fear. "You ruined everything," he hissed. He didn't reach me. Mark tackled him from the side, driving him into the catering table. Trays crashed to the floor, food scattered. Guests screamed and backed away. Protein bars and hummus slid across the hardwood. Two men stepped forward. "FBI," one of them said loudly, badge flashing under the lights. The room froze. Handcuffs clicked shut around Gavin's wrists, the sound sharp and final, echoing louder than the music ever had as cameras continued recording, broadcasting the collapse of a man who had built his entire life on being watched. The fallout did not arrive all at once. It came in waves, each one more devastating than the last, spreading outward from that living room into every corner of Gavin's carefully manufactured life. By morning, the videos were everywhere, clips of his face when the document appeared, screenshots of the email, zoomed in stills of the bank transfers, commentary layered over reaction videos, legal analyses, moral outrage, and armchair psychology. The same audience that once praised his discipline and devotion now dissected his expressions frame by frame. Hunting for the moment his mask cracked. I woke up alone in the house. The silence felt unfamiliar but not unwelcome. The ring lights were still standing where they'd been left, cold and lifeless now. Confetti from a popped party cannon crunched under my feet as I walked to the kitchen. The smell of catered food had turned sour overnight. It reminded me of how quickly excess rots when the performance ends. My phone buzzed nonstop on the counter. Missed calls from unknown numbers, messages from acquaintances who hadn't spoken to me in years. A single text from Gavin's lawyer, formal and restrained, asking that all future communication go through counsel. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. By noon, the GoFundMe page was frozen. By evening, it was shut down entirely. The platform released a statement confirming misuse of funds and announcing full refunds to donors. People demanded prison. They demanded blood. They demanded explanations from anyone who had ever appeared in a photo with him. Brands issued public apologies, scrubbing his image from their feeds as if he had never existed. His sponsors vanished with surgical precision. Tiffany disappeared too. Her social accounts went private within hours. Then they were deleted. No goodbye posts. No statements, just absence. Later, I would learn she had moved out of her apartment in the middle of the night, leaving behind furniture still wrapped in plastic, and a lease she could no longer afford without stolen money propping it up. The hospital was quieter than usual when I arrived. Leo was asleep, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm that grounded me. Machines hummed softly around him, doing the work his body struggled to manage on its own. I sat beside him and held his hand, small and warm in mine, and felt something loosen in my chest for the first time in weeks. Not relief, resolve. The transplant committee reconvened 2 days later. This time, the meeting was brief. Another donor had been identified, anonymous, compatible, willing, everything Gavin had refused to be. When the doctor told me, her voice gentle and professional, I nodded and thanked her, then excused myself to the hallway where I pressed my forehead against the cool wall and breathed until the shaking stopped. Gavin was denied bail, the charges stacked neatly, each one supported by evidence he had helped create himself. Wire fraud, theft by deception, aggravated identity misuse. The irony would have been amusing if the stakes hadn't been so high. He had always believed his image protected him. He never understood that documentation outlives charisma every time. The trial date was set quickly. Public interest ensured that I was advised not to testify unless necessary, but I knew I would. Not because I wanted revenge, but because silence had already cost too much. When I finally sat across from him in a conference room weeks later, he looked smaller. Not physically weaker, but diminished. The confidence that once filled every space he entered had collapsed inward, leaving behind a man who could no longer perform his way out of consequences. He didn't apologize, not really. He talked about pressure, expectations, fear. He talked about how hard it was to live up to an image once the world started watching. I listened without interrupting, the same way I listened to clients when they explained how numbers had somehow betrayed them without their involvement. When he finished, I thanked him for his honesty and stood up. He asked if I hated him. I told him hate required more energy than I was willing to give. Life didn't snap back into place after that. It reassembled slowly, imperfectly, piece by piece. Mornings became quieter. Evenings became real again. Leo's surgery was successful. Recovery was long, but hopeful. Each milestone felt earned, not broadcast. There were no cameras in the room when he took his first unaided steps down the hospital corridor. Just my hands ready to catch him if he fell. I went back to work eventually. The cases felt different. The lies were familiar, but I was no longer numb to them. I had seen what happened when truth was delayed too long, when accountability was treated as optional, when performance replaced responsibility. I carried that with me into every audit, every deposition, every quiet moment spent tracing a number back to its source. Some nights I still think about how close I came to missing it all. How easily I could have kept rationalizing, kept funding, kept believing in a version of love that required my blindness to survive. That thought stays with me, not as guilt, but as a warning. The truth doesn't need theatrics. It doesn't need an audience. It waits patiently, accumulating weight, until it's finally heavy enough to collapse whatever's been built on top of it. And when it does, what remains is what was real enough to survive without being watched.